You close your eyes, visualize your reality through the quantum field, fully understand that matter is nothing but condensed energy. But when you open them again, the same old life is still there. The stagnant bank account, the accumulated stress, and the same heaviness crushing your chest. Why, after spending years decoding the hidden laws of the universe, does the final truth of your search leave you trapped inside the exact same illusion as always? This is the quiet frustration no one talks about. You did the work, you studied, reflected, tried to shift your perception, and still, reality feels unchanged. It creates a split inside you. What you know versus what you live. And that gap starts to hurt, so you push harder, think deeper, try to get it right. But the more you chase the answer, the more distant it feels. Not because it's hidden, but because something in the way you're looking is keeping you from seeing what's already here. Do you know that horrible feeling of studying higher dimensions, beginning to see the codes of spiritual physics, and then looking at the ordinary lives of the people around you and feeling a deep anguish of no longer belonging to this world? It feels like the peak of awakening, but in reality, you have just triggered the first step of a silent and extremely harmful mistake. At first, it feels almost like clarity. Conversations that once seemed normal start to sound shallow. Daily routines begin to look mechanical, repetitive, almost meaningless. You sit in a room with people talking about bills, schedules, small frustrations, and internally you feel like you're watching a play you've already outgrown. There's a distance that wasn't there before, not because others changed, but because your perception did, and that shift can be intoxicating. You start to believe you've seen something others haven't, that you've stepped outside the illusion while everyone else is still trapped inside it. It's subtle, but it grows. You begin to disconnect, not just from people, but from life itself. Simple things lose their flavor, achievements feel empty, even joy becomes suspicious, like it's part of the same system you're trying to transcend. But here's where the distortion begins. What feels like expansion is often a refined form of rejection. Instead of being more present, you are quietly withdrawing. Instead of seeing more clearly, you are filtering reality through a new lens that divides everything into awake and asleep, real and illusion. And that division creates tension inside you, because no matter how far your mind travels, your body is still here. You still wake up in the same bed. You still interact with the same world. You still feel hunger, pressure, desire, fatigue. And when those human experiences don't match the elevated understanding in your head, frustration begins to build. A silent conflict starts forming between what you think reality should be and what it actually is. This is the moment most people don't notice. They think the discomfort is proof they are evolving, that the sense of not belonging confirms they are moving closer to truth. But what's really happening is more delicate and more dangerous. You are slowly positioning yourself against your own existence. It doesn't feel like self-rejection at first. It feels like discernment, like awareness. But underneath that, there's a growing resistance to the very environment that allows your awareness to exist at all. You begin to treat the physical world as something inferior, as something to escape, transcend, or bypass. And without realizing it, you create a split inside your own perception. The higher truth you chase and the illusion you tolerate. That split drains you. Because living in a world you secretly reject requires constant internal effort. Every interaction becomes heavier. Every obligation feels like a distraction from something more important, even if you can't fully define what that something is. You start to feel tired, not from what you do, but from how you relate to everything you do. And the deeper irony is this: the more you try to distance yourself from the illusion, the more real and rigid it begins to feel. It's like pressing against a wall expecting it to disappear, only to feel it harden under your hands. There's also a quiet loneliness that starts to grow, not always visible, not always admitted, but present. You feel misunderstood, but at the same time you stop trying to be understood. You feel different, but you also stop allowing genuine connection, because part of you believes that connection would pull you back into the very illusion you're trying to rise above. So you stay in between, not fully engaged with the world, but not free from it either. And this in-between state is exhausting. What makes it even more complex is that everything you're feeling seems to be supported by what you've learned. Concepts about vibration, dimensions, consciousness, they all appear to validate your distance from ordinary life. It creates a kind of intellectual shield that protects the pattern from being questioned. But something doesn't add up. If this path is leading you closer to truth, why does it feel like you're becoming less alive? Why does everything feel heavier instead of lighter? Why does clarity come with isolation instead of connection? These are not small questions, and they point to something most people overlook. Because the issue isn't that you've seen too much. It's that something in the way you're interpreting what you've seen has created a blind spot, one that quietly redirects your energy in the opposite direction of what you actually seek. And if that blind spot isn't recognized, it doesn't just stay as a feeling of not belonging. It begins to shape your decisions, your energy, and eventually the structure of your entire reality. You are taught that matter has a low vibration, and that your greatest goal should be to escape the chains of the third dimension. But there is a brutal danger in rejecting your mundane reality. If you do not correct this invisible flaw now, you will continue blocking your own vital energy. The reason why this drains your life is counterintuitive, and in a few moments I will reveal the exact mechanics behind how to disarm it. At some point, the idea takes root. If the physical world is dense, slow, and imperfect, then your task must be to rise above it. You begin to associate evolution with distance, from problems, from routine, from anything that feels ordinary. And without noticing, you start measuring your growth by how detached you can become from the very life you're living. It sounds logical at first. If everything is energy, then surely the goal is to align with the highest frequency possible. But here's where the blind spot hides. You assume that what feels heavy must be wrong, and what feels light must be true. That assumption quietly reshapes how you relate to reality. You begin filtering your experiences. Moments of frustration, boredom, or responsibility are labeled as part of the illusion, something to move through quickly or avoid entirely. Meanwhile, moments of peace, silence, or expansion are seen as glimpses of truth. Over time, this creates an internal hierarchy where parts of your life are accepted and others are subtly rejected. And that rejection has a cost, because energy doesn't flow where there is resistance. It contracts. When you treat your daily life as something beneath you, you stop fully participating in it. Your attention becomes fragmented. You are physically present, but mentally somewhere else, waiting for a breakthrough, a shift, a moment when things finally feel aligned. But that moment keeps moving further away, because the very mechanism that would create alignment is being interrupted. You are withholding yourself from your own experience. This is the paradox. The more you try to escape the illusion, the more you weaken your ability to influence it. Not because the illusion is trapping you, but because you are stepping out of the only position from which change is possible. Think about it carefully. Every transformation you've ever experienced didn't come from avoiding reality. It came from engaging with it differently, from seeing the same situation through a new lens, from responding in a new way, from being present enough to notice what others overlook. But when you classify reality as something to transcend, you stop observing it with precision. You stop listening. You stop adjusting. And without those subtle corrections, your life begins to lose coherence. This is where the drain becomes visible. Your body feels heavier, even though you're trying to rise. Your motivation fades, even though you believe you're aligning with something higher. Decisions become harder, not easier, and there's a growing gap between what you understand and what you actually live. That gap is not random. It is the direct result of dividing yourself between what you accept and what you reject, between what you call truth and what you call illusion. And the more that division grows, the more your system struggles to operate as a whole. There's also another layer that often goes unnoticed. When you reject the physical world, you are not just rejecting external circumstances, you are rejecting your own body, your senses, your emotions, the very instruments through which you experience anything at all. And once that disconnection begins, your perception loses accuracy. You start living more in concepts than in reality. And concepts, no matter how elevated they sound, cannot replace direct experience, They can guide you, but they cannot live for you. When you rely on them too heavily, they become filters instead of tools. They distort instead of clarify. So instead of seeing the illusion for what it is, you begin to project your expectations onto it. You expect it to behave in a certain way, to respond to your thoughts instantly, to reflect your understanding without resistance. And when it doesn't, frustration grows. Not because reality is broken, but because your relationship with it is. This is the blind spot of evolution. It doesn't feel like a mistake, it feels like progress. It feels like you are moving forward, when in fact, you are slowly disconnecting from the only ground where real transformation happens. And as this pattern deepens, something even more intense begins to emerge. You start noticing a strange contradiction. The more you try to elevate your awareness, the more unstable your external life becomes. Finances stall, relationships lose depth. Your mental energy starts to fluctuate in ways you can't fully control. It's confusing because it seems to go against everything you've learned. But this contradiction is not random. It follows a very specific mechanism, one that is directly connected to the role you play in shaping your own reality, whether you realize it or not. Because if your perception is part of the system, then the way you observe the illusion is not neutral. It has consequences. The immediate consequence of this escape is a rapid and painful escalation. You feel increasingly elevated in theory, but your practical reality collapses. Financial flow freezes, relationships become shallow, and mental exhaustion takes over. Doesn't quantum physics prove that the observer affects the experiment? So, by forcing rejection toward your own physical vessel, you create a short circuit in the system, collapsing and hardening the exact prison you are trying to escape from. At first, it doesn't look like a short circuit. It feels like bad luck, like a temporary phase, like something external is not aligning yet. You tell yourself that reality just needs time to catch up with your awareness. But while you wait, something subtle keeps happening. Your way of observing the world becomes increasingly charged with resistance, and that changes everything. In simple terms, observation is never passive. The moment you look at something, you are not just seeing it. You are relating to it. There is always a tone behind your attention, a silent judgment, an expectation, a tension, or an openness, and that tone influences how your mind organizes reality. When your observation carries rejection, the system tightens. You look at your bank account and feel frustration, maybe even quiet disgust. You look at your work and feel like it's beneath who you are becoming. You look at people around you and feel disconnected, as if they belong to a different layer of the illusion. None of this is loud or dramatic. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it's consistent, and consistency is what shapes outcomes, because your brain is constantly filtering information based on what it expects and values. When your internal stance says, "This is not where I should be," your attention stops engaging with what is actually in front of you. You miss details. You overlook opportunities. You avoid depth, not consciously but systematically, so your external reality starts reflecting that lack of engagement. Money doesn't flow not because the world is blocking you, but because you are not fully participating in the processes that generate it. Relationships feel shallow, not because others have nothing to offer, but because you are no longer meeting them with presence. Even your own ideas lose strength because they are not grounded enough to take form. This is the short circuit. You are trying to influence the illusion while emotionally stepping away from it. You want results, but you are withholding the one thing that allows results to emerge: coherent attention. Think of it like trying to shape water with your hands while pulling them away at the same time. The less contact you have, the less influence you hold. And the more you interpret that lack of influence as proof that the illusion is rigid or unresponsive, the more you reinforce the very pattern that created it. There's also a deeper layer happening inside your body. When your perception is in conflict, when part of you is here and another part is rejecting being here, your nervous system registers that as instability. It's like giving two opposing commands at the same time: engage and withdraw, act and avoid, belong and escape. This creates internal noise, and that noise drains energy, not in a mystical sense, but in a very direct, physical way. Your focus becomes scattered, your decisions lose clarity, your actions become inconsistent. And over time, that inconsistency compounds into results that feel stuck or even regressive. So while your thoughts are reaching for expansion, your system is operating in fragmentation. This is why the gap between what you understand and what you live becomes so painful. It's not that your knowledge is wrong, it's that your way of applying it is creating interference. You're trying to override reality instead of working with it, and the illusion, instead of softening, becomes more defined. Because whatever you resist without understanding tends to solidify in your perception. The more you push against your current life, the more it feels like a fixed structure. The more you try to mentally escape it, the less flexible it appears. That's not because reality is unchangeable. It's because your observation is no longer aligned with interaction. It's aligned with avoidance, and avoidance cannot reshape anything. It can only distance you from it. So the system responds accordingly. It gives you less feedback, fewer openings, less movement, not as punishment, but as a direct reflection of how you are showing up within it. At some point, this creates a breaking tension. You start to question everything again. Not just the world, but your own path. You wonder why something that promised expansion is leading to contraction, why something that spoke of freedom is creating pressure. And this is where a deeper question begins to surface, one that goes beyond perception and into the very structure of reality itself. If your observation has this much influence, if your relationship with the illusion can either open or close possibilities, then what exactly is this reality made of? Because if it feels so heavy, so solid, so resistant at times, there must be something about its nature that you are still not fully seeing. To relieve this crushing pressure, we need to look at the atomic nature of things. Science has already proven that the chair you are sitting on and your own body are 99.99% empty space. They are merely oscillating fields of probability. Understanding this removes some of the weight, because it proves that reality is not a rigid wall. But it creates an even bigger question. If everything is only an invisible cloud of electrons, why do emotional pain, exhaustion, and the barriers of life hit you with the weight of a concrete mountain? This is where the confusion deepens. Because on one side you have this almost liberating idea, nothing is truly solid. Everything is in motion, dynamic, open, but on the other side, your direct experience tells a completely different story. Bills feel real, time pressure feels real. A difficult conversation can sit in your chest for hours, sometimes days, like something physically heavy. So which one is true? The answer is not as simple as choosing one over the other. The mistake is assuming that empty means light or easy. In physics, empty space is not nothing. It is structured. It behaves according to precise patterns, interactions, and constraints. The fact that something is mostly space does not mean it has no impact. It means its impact comes from relationships, not from mass alone. And that changes how you should look at the illusion. What you experience as solidity is not just about particles being there. It's about how those particles interact, how forces stabilize them, and how your nervous system interprets those interactions. Your senses translate patterns into form. Your brain organizes those forms into meaning, and that meaning is what gives weight to your experience. So when something feels heavy in your life, it is not because it is fundamentally solid, it is because it is highly stabilized in your perception. Think about that for a moment. A habit, for example, has no physical mass, you can't touch it, but it can feel almost impossible to break. A memory has no shape, yet it can influence your entire day. A belief is invisible, but it can determine how you see every opportunity in front of you. These are structures within the illusion that gain strength through repetition and coherence. The more consistent a pattern is, the more real it feels. This is why your current reality can feel so fixed, even when you intellectually understand that everything is fluid. Because fluidity does not mean randomness, it means responsiveness within a system of patterns, and if those patterns are reinforced daily, through your thoughts, reactions, and expectations, they begin to behave like solid objects. Not because they are unchangeable, but because they are stable, and stability creates the sensation of weight. So when you try to change your life by simply thinking differently, without altering the underlying patterns of attention and behavior, it feels like pushing against something dense, not because the illusion is inherently oppressive, but because the structures within it are being continuously reinforced. This is where many people get stuck. They learn that reality is not solid, and they expect immediate flexibility. When that doesn't happen, they assume they are doing something wrong, or that the illusion is somehow working against them. But what they are missing is the role of consistency. A single new thought does not dissolve a stabilized pattern. In the same way that a single gust of wind doesn't dismantle a building, a moment of awareness doesn't instantly reorganize a life. There needs to be a shift, not just in what you think, but in how you repeatedly observe, interpret, and respond. Because that repetition is what either maintains or reshapes the structure, and here's where it becomes more personal. The weight you feel in your life is not just coming from external circumstances. It is coming from the way your system has learned to process those circumstances. The emotional charge, the mental loops, the physical tension, these are all part of the structure. They are the glue that holds certain patterns in place. So even if the illusion is made of empty space, your experience within it can feel incredibly dense if those internal patterns are rigid. But this also reveals something important. If the sensation of solidity comes from stability of patterns, then change is not about escaping reality. It's about gently destabilizing what has become too fixed, not through force, but through awareness applied in a consistent, grounded way. This is a different kind of power. It doesn't rely on rejecting the illusion or trying to bypass it. It works from within it, understanding that what feels like a concrete wall is actually a network of reinforced interactions. And if interactions can be reinforced, they can also be adjusted. But that adjustment requires a shift in how you see the entire structure, not as an enemy, not as a trap, but as something that is functioning exactly as it was designed to. And that realization leads to a question that changes the direction of everything. What if this so-called oppressive system is not a mistake at all? Here is the revelation that shatters common sense and changes the rules of everything you have learned. This oppressive illusion is not a cosmic mistake. The matrix is not a flaw in your journey. The absolute truth you have searched for so desperately among the stars was never hidden behind matter. Matter itself is the truth wearing a tangible disguise. The illusion is not your enemy separating you from God. It is the only visible face of the infinite. At first, this can feel almost offensive to everything you've built in your mind, because a large part of your effort has been directed toward escaping, transcending, or outgrowing this reality. You've treated the illusion as something to decode and then leave behind, like a puzzle that loses its value once solved. But what if the puzzle was never meant to be abandoned? What if its purpose was not to trap you, but to give shape to something that otherwise would remain unreachable? When you think about truth, you probably imagine something pure, limitless, beyond distortion, something that exists without boundaries. And that idea is not wrong, but it is incomplete, because something without boundaries also has no form, no contrast, no way to be experienced directly. It simply is. And something that simply is without form cannot be touched, measured, or lived. It cannot be felt as a moment, as a choice, as a relationship. It has no edge, no beginning, no end. In that state, there is no separation between observer and observed, because there is no distinction at all. Now look at your current reality. Everything here is defined by distinction. You and the world, inside and outside, before and after, desire and fulfillment. These contrasts are what allow experience to exist. Without them, there would be nothing to notice, nothing to learn from, nothing to move through. So instead of being a prison, the illusion starts to look more like a translation system. It takes what is infinite and turns it into something specific. It takes what is formless and gives it structure. It allows awareness to interact with itself in a way that can be perceived, felt, and understood. This changes the entire perspective. Because if matter is not hiding truth, but expressing it, then your relationship with reality needs to shift. You are no longer trying to get past it. You are learning how to read it, how to engage with it, how to recognize the patterns through which something much larger is constantly revealing itself. And suddenly, the things you once dismissed begin to carry a different weight. Her conversation is no longer just noise. It becomes a field of interaction where perception, emotion, and meaning are being shaped in real time. A challenge is no longer just an obstacle. It becomes a point of tension where new responses can emerge. Even discomfort stops being something to avoid and starts becoming information. Not always pleasant, but meaningful. This doesn't make life instantly easy. It doesn't remove difficulty or erase pressure. But it removes the idea that those things are signs of failure or misalignment. Instead, they become part of the structure that allows experience to unfold. The illusion is no longer something that deceives you. It becomes something that reveals you. And this is where the paradox deepens even further. Because if this reality is a valid expression of truth, then rejecting it is not a form of awakening. It is a form of resistance. Not resistance against something false, but against the very medium through which truth becomes visible. That resistance is what creates the sense of disconnection you've been feeling, not because you are separate from truth, but because you are pushing against the way it is appearing in your life. You are looking for it somewhere else, in a purer form, while it is already present in everything you are experiencing, including the parts you don't like, and that is the part most people struggle to accept. Because it's easy to see beauty, peace, or clarity as expressions of something higher, but to look at confusion, limitation, or pain, and recognize that they are also part of the same fabric, that requires a deeper level of understanding. Not blind acceptance, but honest observation. Because when you stop dividing reality into what is spiritual and what is illusion, something inside you begins to reorganize. The internal conflict softens. Your attention becomes less fragmented. You start to meet your life as it is, instead of constantly comparing it to what you think it should be. And in that shift, something unexpected happens. The very density that once felt oppressive begins to feel necessary, not as a burden, but as a condition for experience itself, which leads to a realization that is both simple and difficult to fully absorb. If this structure exists for a reason, then its limitations are not accidental, they are functional. Remember that dangerous mistake of trying to escape this world that I warned you about at the beginning. The creative source is an ocean of unlimited potential, but in its absolute state, it has no texture, contrast, time, or form. For universal consciousness to feel its own touch, evolution, and love, it needed to design dense limitations. The deadly danger of hating the illusion is that you are hating the exact masterpiece the universe created in order to embrace you. Density is not a flaw in the system. It is what makes experience possible. Imagine trying to feel warmth without a difference in temperature, or trying to recognize a sound in a space where no vibration exists. Without contrast, there is nothing to register. Without boundaries, there is nothing to relate to. What you call limitation is, in many ways, the condition that allows anything to be perceived at all. This shifts the meaning of struggle. The resistance you feel in daily life, the delay, the friction, the repetition, is not necessarily evidence that something is wrong. It is often the exact mechanism that gives shape to growth. Without resistance, there is no refinement. Without time, there is no process. Without form, there is no interaction. And yet your instinct has been to move away from all of this, to treat density as something heavy, something that slows you down, something that keeps you from reaching a higher state. But what if that slowness is not holding you back? What if it is giving you the chance to actually experience what you already understand? Because understanding alone is not transformation. You can know that everything is connected, that reality is fluid, that the illusion is not solid, and still feel stuck, disconnected, or overwhelmed. That's because knowledge exists in abstraction, while change happens through interaction, and interaction requires a medium. That medium is density. It is the reason a decision can be made and then tested over time. It is the reason an intention can meet resistance and become clearer. It is the reason relationships can evolve instead of appearing instantly complete. Density stretches experience so that it can be lived, not just imagined. Without it, everything would collapse into immediacy. No waiting, no building, no discovery, just instantaneous existence without narrative. And while that might sound appealing, it removes something essential, the ability to recognize change. If everything happens at once, nothing can be noticed as different. So what you call slow is actually what allows you to see movement. and what you call limitation is what allows you to feel direction. This doesn't mean you have to enjoy every difficult moment. It doesn't mean you should ignore pain or pretend that challenges are easy, but it does mean that rejecting the structure of reality only deepens the sense of conflict inside you. Because you are trying to live in a system while mentally opposing its rules, that opposition creates tension. You expect life to respond instantly, but it unfolds gradually. You expect clarity without friction, but clarity often emerges through it. You expect alignment to feel effortless, but sometimes it requires steady engagement with things that don't immediately feel aligned. And when those expectations are not met, it's easy to blame the illusion, to assume that something is off, that you are blocked, or that reality is somehow out of sync with your awareness. But what if nothing is out of sync? What if the structure is working exactly as it should, and the discomfort comes from resisting its pace and texture? This is where a deeper form of acceptance begins to take shape. Not passive acceptance, where you simply tolerate things as they are, but active acceptance, where you start to see the function behind what you experience, where you recognize that density is not just something to endure, but something to work with. Because once you stop fighting the fact that reality has weight, you can start understanding how that weight behaves. You begin to notice patterns. You see how repetition creates stability. You see how attention reinforces certain directions. You see how small, consistent actions reshape what once felt fixed. And slowly, your relationship with the illusion changes. It no longer feels like something pressing against you. It starts to feel like something you can lean into, something that responds, not instantly, but reliably, something that reflects the quality of your engagement over time. That reliability is not a limitation. It is what makes mastery possible. Because mastery is not about escaping the system, it is about understanding how to move within it with clarity and precision. It is about recognizing that the same density that once felt like a barrier can become a surface through which intention takes form. And this is where something shifts internally. The urge to escape begins to lose its intensity, not because you've given up on change, but because you see a different path to it. A path that doesn't require rejecting the world, but learning how to meet it fully. And when that shift settles, even slightly, the tension you've been carrying starts to loosen. Not completely, not all at once, but enough to create space. And in that space, a new question begins to emerge, not about how to leave the illusion, but about how to live within it in a way that feels aligned, grounded, and real. When this understanding penetrates your mind, the internal war finally ends. You realize that washing dishes, solving a problem on a Tuesday afternoon, and laughing at something silly are phenomena of the highest quantum sacredness. The divine and the mundane are sculpted from the exact same stardust. The anxiety of needing to raise your frequency all the time evaporates and gives way to an immense relief because you realize that you have already been swimming in the sacred all along. This relief is quiet but powerful. It doesn't come with fireworks or dramatic breakthroughs. It shows up in small moments where you stop resisting what is in front of you, where you answer a message without tension, where you finish a task without mentally trying to escape it, where you listen to someone not because it's high vibration, but because you are simply there, and something subtle begins to reorganize inside you. The constant pressure to become something else starts to fade. That background voice telling you that you should be further ahead, more evolved, more aligned, it loses intensity. Not because you've lowered your standards, but because you've stopped measuring your life against an abstract idea of perfection. You begin to notice that presence has a different quality than striving. Striving always carries a sense of lack. It is driven by the idea that something is missing, that where you are is not enough. Presence, on the other hand, doesn't deny growth. It simply removes the rejection of now. It allows you to act, decide, and move forward without turning your current reality into an enemy. And this changes how gravity feels. Before, gravity was something you were fighting, the weight of responsibilities, the repetition of daily life, the slowness of results. It all felt like something pulling you down, something keeping you stuck in the illusion. But when the resistance drops, that same gravity starts to feel like support. It holds things in place. It gives continuity to your actions. It allows effort to accumulate into results. Without it, nothing would stabilize long enough to become meaningful. What once felt like pressure now starts to feel like structure. And structure is what allows intention to land. This is where a deeper form of trust begins to develop. Not blind trust in the idea that everything will magically work out, but a grounded trust in the way reality responds to consistent engagement. You start to see that small actions are not insignificant, that showing up even in simple ways creates momentum, because you are no longer splitting your energy between doing and resisting what you do. There is also a shift in how you relate to time. Before, time felt like a barrier, something that delayed results, something that forced you to wait. Now it starts to feel like a medium, a space where things unfold, where adjustments happen, where clarity deepens. You stop rushing every process, and instead you begin to observe how things develop. That observation brings a kind of calm focus. You still have goals. You still want to improve your life. But the urgency softens. It is no longer fueled by dissatisfaction, but by a clearer sense of direction. You act because it makes sense, not because you are trying to escape your current state, and this makes your actions more precise. You listen more carefully. You respond instead of reacting. You notice when your attention drifts into old patterns of rejection or impatience, and instead of following them automatically, you adjust. Not perfectly, but consistently. That consistency starts to reshape your experience. Situations that once felt heavy begin to feel manageable, not because they disappeared, but because your relationship with them changed. You are no longer adding extra resistance on top of what is already there. You are meeting reality with less friction, and less friction means more clarity. You begin to see details you were missing before, opportunities that didn't register, connections that didn't seem important. The illusion, which once felt like a flat and repetitive surface, starts to reveal depth, not in a mystical way, but in a practical one. You notice how your tone affects a conversation, how your focus influences the quality of your work, how your state of mind shapes the way you interpret events. These are not abstract ideas anymore. They become visible, almost tangible. And that visibility changes how you move. You stop looking for a way out, and you start looking for a way through your current circumstances, through your habits, through your patterns of thought. Not as a struggle, but as a process of refinement. Because now you are no longer at war with gravity, you are learning how to use it. And as this becomes more natural, something else begins to emerge. Something that goes beyond relief or understanding. A sense that maybe, just maybe, this physical form you once saw as a limitation is actually the most precise instrument you have. Not something to escape from, but something to master. It is within this state of deep and genuine acceptance that true alchemy happens. When you stop fighting against the three-dimensional labyrinth, the walls cease to be solid and become a field of energy purely moldable to your intention. You gain mastery over your material life not through the blind effort of escaping it, but by clearly realizing that the Supreme Architect is operating the game from inside your own avatar. This realization doesn't turn you into someone special. It brings you back to something simple that was always available but rarely used with consistency. Your ability to direct attention with clarity and stay with it long enough to shape outcomes. Mastery of physical form begins there. Not in grand visions, not in abstract ideas, but in how you use your attention in ordinary moments. The way you sit with a task, the way you respond to discomfort, the way you follow through on something small, even when there is no immediate reward. These are the places where the illusion becomes responsive, because what you call physical reality is not separate from your participation in it. It reacts to patterns. It organizes around repetition. It stabilizes based on what you consistently reinforce. When your attention is scattered, your results are scattered. When your actions are inconsistent, your environment reflects that instability. But when your focus becomes steady, even in simple things, something begins to align. You start to notice cause and effect more clearly. Not in a dramatic way, but in a grounded, almost quiet way. You see how a clear decision reduces noise, how finishing what you start creates space, how being present in a conversation changes its direction. These are not miracles. They are functions. And the more you see them, the more control you realize you actually have. Not total control over everything that happens, but precise influence over how you engage with what happens. And that engagement is what shapes your path over time. It's what turns possibility into direction. This is where many people misunderstand mastery. They think it means bending the illusion instantly to their will, as if reality should respond without delay. But true mastery is not about removing the process. It's about working with it so effectively that the process becomes fluid. You stop wasting energy fighting what is already in motion. Instead, you begin to read it. You observe where things are stable, where they are flexible, where small adjustments can create meaningful shifts. You stop forcing change in areas that are not ready, and you stop ignoring areas where change is already possible. That discernment changes everything. Because now your effort is not random, it is directed. You are no longer reacting to life, you are interacting with it. And that interaction creates feedback, real, usable feedback that helps you refine your approach. Over time, this builds a different kind of confidence. Not the confidence that everything will go your way, but the confidence that you can navigate whatever comes with increasing precision, that you can adjust, learn, and move forward without collapsing into frustration or detachment. And this is where the body itself becomes important again, not as something to transcend, but as the interface through which all of this happens. Your senses, your emotions, your physical presence, they are not obstacles, they are instruments. They give you information about how you are interacting with the illusion in real time. Tension in your body can show you where you are resisting. Fatigue can show you where your energy is misdirected. A sense of ease can show you where alignment is already present. When you start listening to these signals instead of ignoring them, your decisions become more grounded. You stop relying only on ideas and you begin to trust direct experience. That trust makes your actions more coherent, and coherence is what allows change to stabilize. Because it's not enough to create a moment of clarity. That clarity needs to be lived, repeated, and integrated into your behavior. Otherwise, it fades, and the old patterns take over again. So mastery is not a single breakthrough. It is a relationship you build with reality over time. A relationship where you stop seeing the illusion as something distant or deceptive and start seeing it as something responsive and precise, something that reflects how you show up, moment after moment. And as this relationship deepens, the idea of being trapped begins to dissolve. Not because the structure disappears, but because you understand how to move within it. You see that the same system that once felt limiting is the one that allows you to create, adjust, and experience. And that changes the question completely. Instead of asking how to escape the illusion, you begin to wonder something far more direct and powerful. If this is the medium through which everything becomes real, what does it mean to truly see it for what it is? Why does the truth you seek look exactly like this illusion? Because the immeasurable emptiness of the cosmos needed a flawless and tangible mirror in order to admire its own greatness. The untouchable truth and the palpable illusion are the two arms of the same creator. The next time the weight of routine and matter tries to crush you, do not try to close your eyes and escape. Simply take a deep breath and smile back at the hologram, because that is exactly how the entire universe looks deeply into your eyes. Nothing here is outside of it. Not your doubts, not your effort, not your ordinary days. This is where it all becomes real. If you stayed until this moment, write in the comments, "I see the truth inside the illusion." And if this connected with you, watch one of the videos on your screen. If you want more like this, stay close, and if you feel like supporting the channel, consider becoming a member. Exclusive content is coming soon.